I'm almost 50, strong, clear, energized. Training hard, living clean, fully alive. But it didn't start here. 30 years ago, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and I felt hopeless. But I chose a different path. No meds, just science, discipline, and results. Now I'm symptom-free and asking the tough questions that move us all forward. This is Hope and Health. Let's go. Hello and welcome to Hope and Health with Mathew Embry. Today I am talking to the amazing Crystal Phillips, who is the founder of the Branch Out Neurological Foundation. She's an impact investor, a former elite speed skater, and someone who's thriving with multiple sclerosis. Crystal, thank you so much for being with us today.
It's an honor. Nice to be here.
Crystal, we've got so much to talk about. A lot of our audience has multiple sclerosis. So why don't we start there, if you could share the story of your diagnosis and what happened?
Yeah, I'd love to. I was a teenager at the time. I'm far from that now. And I was also a competitive speed skater. I was one of the top junior speed skaters in the country, looking to compete at the 2010 Olympics. And in 2005, I had my first relapse, not knowing what a relapse was at the time, but literally went from top junior speed skater in the country to losing feeling and sensation from my chest down to my toes, lost bladder control, and developed double vision. That was in a matter of a few days with the loss of sensation, and then the vision stuff came like maybe a couple weeks later. So that was my first relapse. That was back in 2005.
Wow.
And I wasn't diagnosed with MS at that point.
Okay, so how old were you at the time?
I was 19.
So 19 years old, you're an elite speed skater. I'm going to assume you're living a relatively healthy life.
Very.
Okay, so you're doing all the right things to have healthy outcomes. Suddenly you start having these objective neurological symptoms. What's going through your mind?
Up until that point, I hadn't really dealt with much adversity, especially physically. I was kind of gifted with big leg muscles, and that was an advantage in the sport of speed skating. So I climbed the ranks in the country in North America pretty quickly, and all signs pointed to health and high performance.
Wow. So you get these symptoms. Now, what do you think it is? What's going through your mind at that time?
It was just a shock. I don't know if I even thought, if I knew up from down. I just, in a weird way, was fascinated by what was happening to me, because as an elite athlete, you're so in tune with your body and you're so used to having control. So to lose that control was insane. Being naive and having not dealt with much adversity up until that point was actually one of my biggest advantages, because despite being told that my prognosis was not great, I could maybe never speed skate at a high level again, I genuinely didn't believe them, because up until that point, that's all I knew. It's all I cared about. It was my everyday pursuit.
Got it. So you go to the hospital, or you go to the doctor, or was it an ambulance? Like, what happened?
It was a weird thing, because I had just started a new season of training, and we must have done a weightlifting program or something. And there's that thing called DOMS effect, that's called delayed onset of muscle stiffness. And I remember I woke up, I had a weird sensation in my left leg before I went to bed. And then I remember waking up in the middle of the night, and I remember feeling really stiff and weird walking to the bathroom. And then I went to the washroom, and sorry for the overshare, but I could hear myself pee, but I couldn't feel it. And that's what triggered me to be like, oh, my legs, I don't know if this is just weightlifting stiffness. I think something weird is happening, because it feels weird when I touch my legs. And so I woke up my roommate and had her drive me to the hospital.
And what do they think it was at first?
I think they were hesitant to diagnose multiple sclerosis, because as many may know, there's so many symptoms associated with MS and so many things that can go wrong in the neurological system. So they didn't want to diagnosed me with MS right away, but they said, there's a likeliness that I have multiple sclerosis. They sent me to the MS clinic, but my actual diagnosis was transverse myelitis.
Right.
And they said when I got a second relapse, then that would be more conclusive and I'll most likely get the diagnosis of MS. So they didn't prescribe drugs at the time, but they did send me to the MS clinic. as sort of next steps.
So you're 19 years old. I mean, I too was diagnosed at 19 as well. But what's going through your mind at that time? Were you thinking long-term outcomes? Are you scared? Are you going to go after it? I mean, you're an athlete. You've got a history of discipline and attacking things. Did you apply that right away, or what was that phase like for you?
I think I experienced a little bit of emotional whiplash because in some ways I thought this was the end for me. I didn't really know much about MS, and I thought maybe this was a death sentence, and thought, what do I need to get done in my life over the next few years, because I'm going to die soon. So without that knowledge, I didn't know how scared I should be. So of course your brain wanders to sometimes the worst case scenario, especially at your lowest emotional states. So that was on one hand, and then on the other hand, I would be really optimistic, and the competitive nature comes out, and I'm like, no one can tell me I'm never going to speed skate again. I own my own body. I can do this, and had that drive. And I also was a part of a tight-knit community with Speed Skate Canada, and so I had access to top chiros, physios, sports psychologists, nutritionists, and when they heard about me, the community came together and they supported me in ways that they could as well.
Got it. So that's the first year. So what happens next? Do you end up getting an MS diagnosis? What are the next steps for you? Yeah,
so I was sent home with this weird body. I can't remember whether it was the first appointment or second appointment that I got an application to AISH. Again, I was a teenager, and I was also told to fill out a survey for depression screening, which seemed a little bit odd timing-wise, given I had just received the information and my whole world was very scary now. And so,
okay, so can I stop you there?
Yeah.
So I didn't know this part of the story.
Yeah.
So you're sent home at 19 years old with an application for AISH, which more or less they're telling you you're not going to be able to have a job.
Yeah.
And they're screening you for depression.
Yeah.
So you're more or less sent home with forms that are putting you in a box.
Putting me in a box. And I would say the worst part of all of that was they're saying you probably will never speed skate again at that level.
Right.
Which, to be honest, like, because I didn't know much about MS, telling me, oh, you have this multiple sclerosis disease with no cure, it's a degenerative neurological condition. Like, to me, that's like telling me H to the ISO. Like, I really didn't know what it meant. Mm-hmm. But when they said you will probably not speed skate again at a high level, I was like, wait a sec. Like, right. That is the most devastating news I've ever heard in my life. And so that paired with the depression screening test, you bet I qualified for depression. But I don't know what I was thinking, but I knew I didn't want to go on any kind of depression drug. So I remember thinking it was a bit odd because, of course, I'm crying frequently and all the other typical questions to determine whether I'm on the drug or not. So I didn't go on the drug and I didn't apply for AISH. I instead kind of channeled the competitive side to look at what do I have, what can I do, what can I eat, what can I move, and just try to focus on that. I guess sports psych came in handy at that point, and good advice and support from my family.
So what did you do? Like, what steps did you take? Did you change your lifestyle? Did you see other doctors? Did you take a second opinion? What were those steps?
At that point, I just took it one day at a time. My mom had to move in with me because I had stairs in my house, and I didn't know what was going to happen with me, and so I just took it easy. Took time off sport, obviously, and slowly was able to regain feeling, and over a course of 4 months went from that hard to walk, losing bladder control, to being able to walk, bike again. And then I joke I looked like a baby giraffe on ice, but I was able to skate again. And about 4 months after I was able to walk, I raced my first competition. Wow. And it was awesome. For the community was really supportive. It was exciting to see me recover from that very dramatic relapse and be back on the ice. However, cried myself to sleep that night because my times were now so slow compared to before this all happened, and I felt so behind, and I'm like, I need to make the Olympics. Like, I don't have time for these slow times. So I woke up the next morning, and overnight it was like a line was drawn down the middle of my body, and the entire left side of my body stopped working. So it was hard to move my left arm, my left leg. It almost looked like I had a bit of Bell's palsy. My left side of my mouth, I couldn't taste food. So that's when it really hit me, like, okay, I have multiple sclerosis. I'm not this invincible teenager, and bad things can happen.
So let me understand this. It was the night of your comeback race, you had another relapse.
Yeah. It was humbling because I thought it was for the first time I accepted that this bad thing has happened to me, whereas before I was probably just more naive and mad and had so many emotions that conflicted with each other that I didn't have a real acceptance. So then I got diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and it really hit me there.
What does acceptance mean for you at this time?
It was the shock of, and that sad, I feel like it was a loss of my naive, young, ignorant attitude where I just thought everything would work out great going forward.
You had the official diagnosis of multiple sclerosis. What was the path forward?
So the path forward was when I saw my neurologist, got the official diagnosis, and started Copaxone, a daily drug injection. Nurses showed at the house and actually taught my roommate how to inject the needles in case I wasn't able to reach, because you had to switch locations every day. And in case, I can't remember why, but sometimes it's always subcutaneous, but sometimes you needed to potentially not use just like the device in case it broke or something. So she had to learn in case I needed help. And then that's also when I had some time to just really reflect on how I wanted to approach this. I had really great support network in the community of speed skating. I had a really supportive family. My parents encouraged me to, again, focus on what I do have, what I can do, think about the positive, that sort of thing. And then in my own reflection, I thought, in order to be an elite athlete, it doesn't just take a good training program and an ice rink. You do need a very holistic group of experts, and you build a team of expertise from different areas to get to that optimal performance. And so I think naturally as an elite athlete, I had that same mindset when I looked at what I need to do to reach optimal health. And so I knew that there had to be more than just what my neurologist was telling me, because the minute I got curious and asked many, many questions, I think I hit the limit of what I was going to get from my neurologist. And so then I did what probably most MS patients did, which is I went on and asked Dr. Google a lot of questions.
Right.
I started reading stories. I started looking at other practitioner types, and then I came across your dad.
Okay.
And that's around the time when I did. And I had a meeting, I remember somewhere in University of Calgary, and Dr. Embry, your dad, told me all about this other piece of work that's been done, that he's dedicated his life to look at the dietary implications in something like MS. And so that's the first time I had heard about that. I was fascinated about diet as a speed skater. I immediately went on his MS diet protocol. And then I also was so inspired by him, and I don't know if you know this either, but I actually signed up to be a part of the Canadian School for Natural Nutrition.
Okay. Yeah.
I took the 1-year diploma program to become a nutritionist.
Got it. Wow.
Yeah. In addition to that, I also studied herbal medicine, and I became a guinea pig for both conventional and unconventional health solutions.
Now, prior to talking to my dad about the Best Bet diet and some of the strategies that we have on mshope.com, did you have any guidance nutritional from your neurologist or your doctor?
No, only vitamin D. And I actually think your dad had a huge part in getting that to the finish line, and the finish line being something that the neurologists themselves would recommend to their patients.
So you had no guidance to get to nutrition other than the research you did.
Yeah.
And once you found that path, what was it about that changed your mind? Well, what made it, because it wasn't coming from a medical doctor or a neurologist, but what changed your mind to think that nutrition might have something to do with my disease outcomes?
Well, as a speed skater, you know that nutrition was a huge part, and that I was taking creatine and protein powder and thinking about my macronutrients. But when I went to the Canadian School of Natural Nutrition, that's when I really started to understand micronutrients and became more and more inspired by the power of what we eat and how it affected us physically.
So you start taking a different approach to diet. For people who are considering that, what were the real world steps you took?
Honestly, after I talked to your dad, I was so inspired and quite frankly desperate, like most MS patients are, especially in the early days. So I did a complete 180. I threw away anything that wasn't on the diet. And I think this is the most important part, is I adopted that attitude of focus on what you can eat, not what you can't eat. Also to further inspire, because sometimes you don't get the satisfaction from taste all the time. It's not exactly what I had been training my body to crave. I started to get inspired by learning about the nutrients of all this food. And every time I ate it, not only would it start tasting better, but I was also inspired and could literally visualize why this food was helping me. And so when people ask me what I did to regain my health, I always put it in 3 categories of healthy thinking first, then healthy eating, and healthy moving. But that healthy thinking part, that's the first step for anyone, I think. Yeah.
I agree. And that's very difficult.
It's the hardest part by far to this day.
So I agree. So can you share any of the tricks or the things you do to keep that mindset in the right place?
Yeah, I got really good advice, and someone described it as a bottomless bucket. It's happiness, motivation, optimism. That stuff is a bottomless bucket. It's a daily practice. And so when you value health and whatever other value it is, you need to understand what it takes to get there. And it's not just what you strive for, it's what you practice every day.
So for you, what would be a practice to get to kickstart? I mean, I know I've got my little hacks. I've got I try to start a lot of days with listening to affirmations. I find YouTube links that really get my brain. It sounds basic, but when I'm making lunches for the kids, it's just, I'm listening to this for the first 10, 20 minutes, and it seems to get me going in the right direction. Are there things that you do?
I recently experienced a quote by Chris Hadfield during one of his keynotes, and he said the antidote to fear is competence. And I would say that is part of the strategy that I adopted early. And for competence, I was obviously so scared of my future, what was happening to my body. So my antidote, and something that really helped me, is I would research about all of the possibilities, and I maintained a very curious mindset. So I didn't judge any of the healthcare systems or any of my practitioners, despite very opposing views. I just tried to take a high-level view and understand from my perspective what actually makes sense, and then started to experiment. And of course, as I got more and more results, the more I started to explore some of the non-conventional or non-pharmaceutical approaches, I became more and more encouraged and inspired to keep down that path and keep learning and trying new strategies.
So you make these major changes in your life. You're still exercising, I assume?
Every day, yeah.
Okay, so exercise is still a piece. Vitamin D, you're taking optimal doses of vitamin D.
Yeah.
What changes do you start seeing?
Over the course of the next 4 years, leading up to the 2010 Olympics, I was able to get back to an elite level in sport. And although I had a few minor relapses, they were minor. And so my relapses became fewer and further between. And when I had them, they were minor. Now, when I got to 2009, right before the 2010 Olympic trials, I lost vision in my left eye overnight, which is apparently a common symptom of MS. And that was considered a pretty major relapse as well. I also saw my neurologist again after the relapse, and they told me, it doesn't look like Copaxone is working. Based on my MRI results, it looks like there's still a lot of progression. There was even threatening language around me progressing and developing progressive MS. And even and I'll never forget that my neurologist at the time even talked about the possibility that he's like, I don't want you wheeling in here in 2 years wishing you did everything you could, when he was trying to get me on the next drug. And so when he listed the drug's side effects, honestly, they sounded worse than the disease itself. And I was really excited about the fact that the more I did in the non-conventional realm, the better I felt and the faster I skated. So I made the decision then, and it was easy for me, but really hard for the people around me who loved me and cared and were just as scared as me, especially because I was now in relapse again. I decided to go off all of my drugs completely, because I thought, okay, if you're telling me that those are all of the side effects, and that I'm going to be in a wheelchair in 2 years anyways, like, what do I have to lose? So that's when I made the decision to go off all my drugs completely. I raised more money thanks to generous donors, and was able to use private health to get more testing done and try things outside of the conventional healthcare system recommendations that were maybe a little bit more extreme. By the time it was trials for the 2010 Olympics, I had made a full recovery. I raced in the trials and just missed the team by a few spots. And I actually ended up going because the government of Alberta had been following my story, and they wanted me to still have that experience at the Olympics, which was an amazing way to end my career there. It was an incredible experience. I got to watch my teammates and cheer them on after being kind of in the trenches with them leading up to that moment that is so precious, and it's so short that you want to seize the moment as best you can. So it was an incredible experience, and I'm so grateful that I have those memories just ingrained in my brain.
Now, there's one other thing you mentioned. It was some of the fear tactics that you experienced when you went to the neurologist. This is something that a lot of MS patients have shared with me. Can you describe your experience and what you did in that environment?
Yeah, it's so unfortunate, because I don't want to paint this negative picture about neurologists. And I've met so many amazing ones, and I've had real human-to-human experiences with them. But this particular experience was extremely negative, and I think it's worth mentioning. And I hope that, if you are a practitioner of any kind and listening to this, that like the long-term effects of something like that has on physically on someone. It took me psychologist appointments. I had to be really proactive, and thankfully I had that drive in me to get back to a state of optimism. But it took a lot of work to recover from that appointment, not based on the results of my MRI, but based on the language used by my doctor at the time.
And the language was trying to move you towards a pharmaceutical with the fears of the horrible outcomes from MS? Yeah,
and it didn't work on me. In fact, I don't know if it's the rebel in me, but I was like, don't tell me how my disease... I mean, this is an unpredictable disease. How can you predict my future? And also, I'm being compared to the norm. And I live a very, very healthy, active life and try so hard to reach optimal performance and health that why am I compared to the norm? Mm-hmm. And the more I learn about how research is done, it's the way that they think about the science and think about statistics and what is normal and what isn't. It's just, you look at a broad spectrum of people and find the average.
Well, and I think, you've known me for many years. The people who follow me also know that, I can be highly critical of the MS ecosystem. It's got its fair share of problems. It's a billion-dollar industry, pharmaceuticals, and for all the charities and all the things that surround it, and we still have no cause and no cure. And this is decade after decade. I was told there'd be a cure in 5 to 10 years. Mm-hmm. That was 30 years ago. As far as I can tell, it's nowhere near in sight. I mean, closest projects I've seen, maybe under 10, maybe. But for you, you operated outside the system as well. But not only that, you built your own organization. You stepped in to create your own system. Can you share that journey? What did you do right from the beginning?
Yeah, so it actually starts with a conversation with my neurologist. I remember this was around 2009, 2010-ish time. And I remember getting negative results from my MRI, but I was symptom-free and feeling really good, and at this point was in a good state for speed skating. And they asked me a couple of questions, like, are you on a drug or not? I was like, no, I'm no longer on a drug treatment plan. Are you doing other things? And it was just kind of like a check mark. It wasn't like, what else are you doing? Which I wanted to give them like the scroll of things that I do for my health, because I'm like, the highest rates in the world, or some of the highest rates in the world are in Calgary. We're so rich with data. And so when I saw her just check a box that I do other things, I thought, what a missed opportunity for what's possible to research. And so then it's like I went from feeling that like a victim patient to just kind of taking that guard down and looking at my neurologist, and I said, now you must see this situation a fair bit where someone comes in, they're actually doing really, really well, and they tell you all these things that they're doing, and you wish that maybe you could prescribe it to the next patient, but without the proper scientific validation behind it, you don't have the confidence to prescribe it. And she turns around and looks at me for like a good 3 Mississippis, and she's like, I wish it every single day. And I was like, whoa, that is a crazy moment, because like, for better or for worse, my neurologists were evil at the time. You know, they were always giving me bad news, and it always seemed like they were against what I was doing, which seemed like a bit rebellious. But that in that moment, I was reminded that they are just humans doing their best, trying to make it work. And they're just as devastated as I am watching these other MS patients lose their quality of life. And so that's when I became really motivated to help solve that problem. And so I started the Branch Out Neurological Foundation to literally branch out, fund an entire new field of study that focused on non-pharmaceutical approaches and innovation in technology, which in 2010 was quite novel. And I didn't want to fight any systems. I really wanted to sort of lean into the enemy and to understand what gives them the confidence to be able to prescribe this so that it becomes adopted in mainstream. And so I collected what I called unlike minds and these experts from a bunch of different fields, because let's face it, I had this dream of building this national neuroscience charity, and my background in education is skating in circles for 20 years. So I had to collect those unlike minds so that I could formalize a charity, be able to raise money. And that's when I learned that valuable lesson of play your strengths and outsource the rest. And one of my strengths was getting people together, and also creating a vision that other people would buy into. So I naturally organized a bike tour event and was able to raise my first few $100,000 with that. But more importantly, it gave me a platform to speak to my vision and test case it on people to see, is this just my vision? Is this only me who has these frustrations? And as you can guess, I wasn't alone. Many people had many similar situations and frustrations and desires to have high quality research to back up some of the less conventional approaches to healing, not just MS, but anything to do with the neurological system, which is a whole other rabbit hole we could go down. I just don't think we should limit ourselves or even have diagnoses like MS, because we don't know what MS is yet. And we also don't know how our brain works yet. Obviously, we know a lot about both of those things, but until we have all the answers, why are we shutting the doors on thinking that we know enough to create a diagnosis? So I wanted to look at neurology and neuroscience more holistically, because I believe that whatever we learn about concussion or depression or Parkinson's disease helps us get that missing piece to the puzzle of the brain, and therefore could help MS research as well.
So how did things go? I mean, you start this organization, you're raising money, what were the outcomes like for you?
Yeah, well, thankfully and ironically, my first speed skating coach just happens to have a PhD in neuroscience. And so when he heard about my vision, he was with me throughout my MS diagnosis journey. He was really passionate to help me. And he really taught me and made sure that I was able to set up what's called a scientific review panel, which was that due diligence layer to ensure that what we were funding was very scientifically sound and accepted in mainstream as high quality research. And so I learned from experts like him, and because I had now a bit of a platform to collect those unlike minds, I encouraged working collaboratively with them to use everyone's strengths to, even setting up a charity is hard, fundraising, and then setting up a research program, starting with undergraduate research, because you get kind of more bang for your buck because they're cheaper. They're 3-month summer studentships. Then we were able to, as we raised more money, fund graduates, master's students, PhDs, and now we fund all the way from undergrad to PIs. And wow. I think some of our undergrad summer studentships are just as impactful as the PI research, and it's important to collect that expertise and creativity and innovation all along the academic line.
Let's talk about how your personal story has made an impact. You've shared it, you're sharing it now, you've stepped out, you've been public. Why have you done this, and what are the positive things you've seen?
Well, I'm glad you asked this, because sometimes I forget to talk about the good part of my story, because now you've heard about the nightmare part, which is all the relapses and the drugs and the emotional roller coaster that you go through with, especially the early days of a diagnosis like MS. After I decided to go off my drugs, had just missed the Olympic team by a couple spots. It is now, what year is it? 2025, and I haven't had a relapse since.
Wow.
So I not only have not had a relapse since, but after I retired from elite level sport, basically all of my symptoms went away. And although I do have some minor symptoms that come and go, they're very manageable, and I would take them over the common cold.
Wow. So right now you're living more or less symptom-free. You haven't had any type of relapse in 15 years.
That's right.
Are you still sticking to a nutrition path? What's a day-to-day, what does it look like for you?
Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, I have gone to some of the extremes with diet. I was very strict with the protocol for a number of years. Then I also looked at ketogenic diet, was interested because we were funding a bunch of research in that field, and just out of my own interest, I wanted to try it myself. So I've tried that. And ultimately, despite have swung the pendulum with going from like a regular person's diet to what I would consider more extreme, I think now I've found a lot more balance in the middle. And if I do have even the tiniest bit of a symptom, I take it really serious and I go back to a more strict protocol.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And vitamin D and exercise is still part of the day-to-day?
Yeah, so that healthy thinking practice is a daily practice still. I'm very conscious of my diet, despite not being as strict and stringent about it. And then because I'm no different than a golden retriever, like if I don't go for a run, I will misbehave. So I'm intrinsically motivated to work out, and it's one of my stress relievers and my joys in life. So that one's kind of easy for me, but I understand that's sometimes one of the biggest hurdles for people.
Now, can we talk about the power of sharing your own personal story? I mean, it's obviously something in my journey that I've seen the value of. I can almost guarantee you right now, there's a young woman watching this podcast or online, or seeing it, through mshope.com, who's just been diagnosed and who's seen you, years later, thriving, living, from what I can tell, a pretty unbelievable life. Like you're doing great. Mm-hmm. What advice would you have for her?
I find it such a privilege when I get to talk to people at this stage, because I'm often one of the only optimistic or positive voices in that early journey of getting diagnosed. And it's an honor to catch them at that point and give them another perspective that may change the course of how they think about their future. And I remember how powerful that was for me. And so to be able to give that gift to someone else is truly a gift for myself. That reminds me of another quote, because they say the love that you give is the love that you feel. And I think that this is a great example of that. Now, as you can imagine, I'm sure you experience yourself, it means that the more public you get with your story, the more you have people coming to you and wanting to meet or hear more. So I've been able to help people in different ways, whether it's just sharing all of the health protocol that I follow to this day, resources. Your website is still one of those. And then of course, if they have further questions, and it works with my schedule, I'll go for coffee and meet with them, or take a phone call or a Zoom call, and discuss it a little further. And it's, people feel guilty to introduce, my friend just got diagnosed. Do you mind? I know you're so busy, but do you mind? And I really do. If I'm busy or stressed, I have to remind myself it is an absolute privilege to be in this position where I can advise and give someone else some of that hope.
Let's talk about how you have to advocate for oneself. It seems in both of our journeys, and for almost everybody who I've met who's had a successful ride with multiple sclerosis, so to speak, they've really had to advocate for themselves, research themselves, and educate themselves. Can you talk about that personal accountability?
Yeah, I think the personal accountability is important for any human that breathes. Whether you have MS or not, I think you have to be an advocate for your health. I think we have an incredible healthcare system in many, many ways, but it's still easy to slip between the cracks, and not everyone knows everything about everything. And you yourself are by far the most knowledgeable about your body, your symptoms, your goals, and that should be considered with all of your health choices in life. So I'm a big proponent and advocate for being the CEO of your own health.
Looking back, I'm going to ask you a tough question, or a tough way to look at it. For me, it's been 3 decades now. It's been 30 years. When I was diagnosed, the thought of sitting around making podcasts about the issue and still talking about it seems unimaginable. I had different plans for my life. I really wanted to go to Hollywood. I had a clear path of where I wanted to go. It has not worked out like I thought. And a lot of the dreams I had to leave behind. But would I trade it? No, not now. Not being able to see where my life went, some of the impact that our organization has been able to make. And I did end up oddly getting to Hollywood because of it. So for you, how does that apply to your journey, given that you were so focused, you had such a clear dream, you did end up at the Olympics, just not the way you thought?
Yeah, your perspective changes along the way. My dream to make the Olympics was all I knew growing up. And having gone through this health experience, when I made the decision to retire, a dream of filling gaps in the healthcare system and helping others became way bigger than the Olympics themselves. And so the success with the Branch Out Foundation, raising millions of dollars and funding research in now 12 universities across Canada, learning about those impact stories, and then also learning about the impact that sharing my story with someone else has made on their lives personally. In some cases, I've had people reach out and say, you know what, I had suicidal thoughts, and it wasn't until I started following your story and your positivity that it turned my life around. And I still remember that email from someone random that on a hard day, I think back to, and again, it's just such a privilege to be here and of course be in good health as well.
If we get down to the pragmatic, the day-to-day, what does an average day look like for you? So someone who just wants, how do I find this? What are the basics?
I wake up at 5:30 and then I pet my dog, get my gym clothes on, and I head to the gym. And I work out from 6 till 7 in the morning, most days during the weekdays. And then I take my dog for a 20 to 30 minute walk afterwards before I get ready and go to work. And then I go to work. I work very full days, sometimes long days with events that are in the evening, and then come home, make dinner, eat dinner, go to bed. And my dinner is often a smoothie or a salad or eggs and vegetables. Those are my go-tos.
So for someone living with multiple sclerosis for so long, this sounds like a fairly, say, normal life.
Very normal life, yeah.
And I think that message is really important to share with people, that this is possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's about possibilities.
I think I'm all about just kind of pushing the limits to the edge, because often especially when you have a disease and a diagnosis like MS, you're told by many people, not just your practitioners, that you should slow down, take it easy, do less, you're incapable of this, you should take on less. And I have that competitive mindset still of like, I'm going to keep pushing the limits, because I think the further you get to that line, the more it moves out and the more you're able to accomplish. And so I live a very full and fascinating life, and I can accomplish a lot in one day.
Crystal, thank you so much for sharing your inspirational story. Personally, I know we've known each other for many years now. Every time I see you looking so healthy and so happy, it's a huge motivator and inspiration to me. And I know that your story is going to change lives. So thank you for sharing it with us.
Likewise, Matt. It's been incredible following your story, and it's so good to see you so healthy. Let's keep on doing what we're doing, because we're making an impact, and this is fun to be able to be together and talk about it at such depth.
Thanks, Crystal.
Thanks for joining us. Hope and Health is made possible through generous donations. To learn more or support the show, visit mshope.com, where you'll find free science-based resources.